Welcome to the LEA Private Nonprofit Equitable Services Random Validation Training. I am Lenny Treges, the ESA Private Nonprofit Ombudsman in the Federal Program Compliance Division. The Private Nonprofit, or PNP, Random Validation for 21-22 will request documentation for one selected program requirement. However, a district must ensure it has documentation on file for all PNP program requirements. This presentation will share information regarding the maintained inventory control of purchases for PNP Equitable Services indicator and the documentation submission process. Documenting overall compliance for a program requirement may require several forms of documentation to be maintained locally and available upon request by TEA and/or another auditor. To ensure overall compliance with program requirements, LEA should refer to the program guide and/or other program-related resources that reference the multiple forms of documentation required to be maintained locally. The documentation requested for submission during the random validation process may not include all forms of documentation that are required to be maintained locally. Please note that due to COVID-19, documentation for virtual meetings is an acceptable form of documentation. Given the increased use of virtual meeting environments, participant rosters that include the meeting title, meeting date, and stakeholder names and roles would be acceptable substitutes for the more traditional sign-in sheets. This eliminates the need of a participant signature. For the 21-22 school year, the LEA must submit documentation to support it maintained inventory control of all purchases for PNP Equitable Services. LEA should review the 2021 through 2022 PNP Random Handbook. LEA maintained inventory control of PNP purchases for Equitable Services. This handbook provides the information regarding the selected PNP requirement, instructions for completing the submission packet, instructions for uploading random validation documents, and a time frame for the PNP random validation process. In addition, the handbook shares the alignment among the ESA statutory citations, the ESA program-specific provisions and assurances, and the compliance report. LEAs will complete the applicable sections of the submission packet, include specifically identified relevant documentation, and follow the random validation handbook instructions to submit documentation through the ESA reports application on TEAL no later than January 14, 2022. The ESA Section 1117 provides the statutory requirements for the Title I Part A program. The LEA must maintain inventory control of PNP purchases for Equitable Services. The LEA must keep control of all funds titled to materials, equipment, and property purchased for Equitable Services. The ESA Section 8501 provides the statutory requirements and the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 34, Section 299.9, citation references for Title 8 programs. Title 8 programs include Title II Part A, Title III Part A, Title IV Part A, and Title IV Part B. The statute LEAs must keep control of funds in the Title II, all purchases for PNP Equitable Services. program-specific provisions and assurances relating to the Title I Part A PNP requirement, maintaining inventory control of PNP purchases for Equitable Services state. The control of Title I Part A funds and Title II materials, equipment, and property purchased with such funds shall be in a public agency, and a public agency shall administer such funds, materials, equipment, and property. Assurances relating to the Title VIII PNP program services may be found in the ESA Consolidated Federal Grant Application. The Title VIII program refers to sections 8501 through 8504. You may click the link to learn more about the Title VIII program-specific provisions and assurances. On the 21-22 LEA Compliance Report, one of the LEA program compliance self-check indicators are for the LEA to maintain inventory control of purchase for PNP Equitable Services. On the ESA Consolidated Federal Grant Application, the LEA must keep procedures to maintain and control the PNP's technology, equipment, and supplies purchased for Equitable Services programs. LEAs are required to submit specific documentation that provides evidence of LEA internal control policies and procedures were in place. Acceptable evidence could include a copy of written policies and procedures regarding purchases of PNP technology, equipment, and supplies for Equitable Services, and one sample of dated agendas, consultation notes, and/or other documentation specifying LEA maintains control of the PNP Equitable Services purchases and the inventory list of items purchased for PNP Equitable Services on one private school campus for each participating ESA program. With this particular requirement, the LEA is required to submit these 3 bullets of documentation to support it maintained inventory control of PNP purchases. Documentation required to ensure that the LEA maintained inventory control of purchases for Equitable Services includes written documentation to support the LEA internal control policies and procedures. Issues that may result in an improvement needed status are the auditable documentation requested was not submitted, documentation submitted does not reference each of the 3 requested PNP validation requirements, or the documentation from a prior year was submitted instead of current year documentation. Selected LEAs for the PNP random validation will receive notification on December 1st, 2021. LEA's documentation will be due January 14th, 2022. The ESC will be available to provide technical assistance for districts. TEA will notify the LEA of its random validation results on April 26, 2022. If there is improvement needed, the LEA will have an opportunity to receive additional ESC technical assistance before resubmitting documentation on September 30th, 2022. Thank you for joining this session today. If you have additional questions or need further technical assistance, please send an email to isasupport@tea.texas.gov. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.